Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for From ACUE to Breakthrough Student Success Stories. We do appreciate you just taking the time to gather with us today as we will hear from some of our faculty to share their experience in ACUE and the impact that it's having on their teaching, but also the impact on the students in their courses. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge Ms. Shannon Koss, who is here from ACUE. Shannon serves as our Regional Customer Success Director. I did not tell you that you needed to say anything, but if you would like to, you're more than welcome to do so.
Thank you. I just noticed I was frozen, but it doesn't seem that way anymore. I'm so happy to be here. I'm 99.99% sure I'll be at your pinning ceremony coming up, so hopefully get to meet some of you. And yeah, I've been with ACUE since September, so quickly getting onboarded. And Dr. Ship here is one of the best. I wish we could multiply him across all of my partners, but so grateful to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. So before we begin, in the spirit of teaching, learning, engagement, before we jump right into our topic, I do want to share just a brief uh, slide with you. And so if you all do recall, and can you give me a thumbs up to let me know that you're seeing the slide? Okay. You see, okay. If you recall, at the beginning of this particular academic year, we had our State of the Campus address. And Chancellor Brown shared during her opening remarks about a focus that we will have as an institution. So I want you to take a moment and see if you can recall what were the two words that she shared with us will be the institutional way of life here at WSSU. I want you to hold it. Don't say it. Don't unmute it. Don't put it in the chat. See if you can think about what those two words are. And then once you have those two words in the chat, I want you to type your response, but do not hit enter. Do not hit enter. I know, resist the temptation. Do not hit enter. Think of those two words and then type your response in the chat. And then I'll count down and I'll ask everyone to then hit enter so that we can then see the waterfall of responses that come in. And so again, for those who are just joining us, if you will recall at the beginning of this academic year, Chancellor Brown, during her opening remarks for the State of the Campus address, she made a statement in her address that something that will guide us as an institution as our way of life. And so if you can think of what those two words are, you can put it in the chat, but do not hit enter. And then I will count down and I'll ask everybody to then submit their response. Okay? So on the count of three, 1, 2, 3. Oh, look at that. Look at all these A students in here. Student success. Yes, you all were listening and paying attention. So again, if you remember, as she was guiding us in that address, she talked to us about student success being an institutional way of life. Now, we know that there are many variables and factors that impact student success, but we want to focus today specifically on the role of teaching and learning on student success, particularly here at WSSU. And so to help us in having our conversation on today, we do have three of our faculty members who will be sharing. We have Dr. Rashaunda Richardson, who serves as Associate Provost. I done gave you a promotion. Associate Professor in Psychological Sciences. We also have Dr. Melissa Bowman Foster, who is an Associate Professor in the MHA Program Coordinator for Healthcare Management. And then Dr. Patrick Crowe, who serves as Assistant Professor of Sport Management. I'll give each of you an opportunity just to greet everyone, and then we'll jump right into some of the questions that we have for today. And I'll start with you, Dr. Richardson.
Hello, I am not anybody's provost. I just want to clarify that. But I have been at WSSU since fall of 2016 here in the psychology department, and I'm an educational psychologist by training. So that's just a quick little bit about me.
Dr. Bowman Foster.
Hi, I have also been here since 2016. Oh, who would have thought? So, again, I'm in healthcare management. I teach in both the undergrad and grad, and I have been coordinator for the graduate program since 2017. So happy to be here.
And Dr. Crowe.
Hello, everyone. I have only been here for 2 years. Well, actually, the end of the semester will be the end of 2 years. But yeah, so I recently graduated from my PhD program of May of 2023 now. So this is my first post in position. So excited to be here and excited to keep talking about education.
Wonderful. Thank each of you. And so to get us started, our first question is, what motivated you to pursue ACUE's professional development training, and how has it influenced your teaching and your teaching philosophy? So what motivated you to pursue ACUE's professional development training, and how has it impacted your teaching and teaching philosophy? We'll start with you, Dr. Richardson.
So what motivated me was and what is actually part of my teaching philosophy is that I believe that I can always get better, right? I feel like there's always something new I can learn. And whatever I learn, I want to be able to use it to pass down to my students. And so one thing that ACUE has done, specifically this course that we are taking, it has really shown me that the stuff I do in my in-person classes, I can translate that to my online synchronous or asynchronous classes. And so now in my teaching philosophy, I don't necessarily dictate that I do this online or this in person. I can really talk about how I can facilitate the core tenets of my teaching philosophy online, asynchronous, synchronous, or in person. And so it has really shown me how I can do that. So that's how it's impacted me.
I'm guessing I'm next. So being coordinator for the MHA program, we are a fully online program now. When I took over, we were still hybrid, and then we did the transformation. It is so important to kind of like Dr. Richardson was saying, there's always room for improvement. My grandmother was 95 when she passed away, and I remember she would tell me every day she learned something new to make herself a better person, and I think that's so important. No matter how many years you have been doing something, there's always a way to be better at it. And, we also expect that from our students. I teach in healthcare, so I actually still work PRN healthcare hours because how can I teach them how to work in healthcare if I don't still do it? And same thing with teaching. How can I expect them? I constantly stress to them continued education credits and things like that once they do start embarking on their professions. I'm like, because you have to stay up to date with things. Well, I can't tell them to do that if I'm not going to do the same thing myself. So that was one of the main reasons that, I pursued this. With my teaching philosophy, one of the big things that it really made me kind of modify, we all tend to be afraid of change. And, I like my teaching philosophy. It's my core. I love it. But, I've learned I can't be afraid of change because if I am, I'm not going to improve and I'm doing a disservice to my students that way. So it really helped me, encourage myself to be okay to edit my teaching philosophy to go with the times and change with the times and whatnot. So, Dr. Crowe, over to you.
All right. I hope I don't go third every time, so y'all steal the best things every single question. But no, I do want to echo the idea of continued education to lead to student success. To try to bring it back to what Dr. Ship said earlier as well. I think that through us constantly trying to improve how we think, how we teach, and how our students can teach, it's always going to be the best way to make sure that they're motivated and have the skills that are necessary to depart to serve, as we like to say at WSSU. So like I said, I have just started my full-time position here for 2 years. I've been teaching for close to 7 years now. So my idea behind it, or the motivation behind it, was to try to best understand what the practices are in today's day and age, and then, 5, 10 years later, do the same thing. See how these practices change, see how they stay the same, through all the research that all the great scholars are doing in the education field right now. So that was kind of my idea of why I want to do this. So early in my career, along with just being the best I can right now, and to think through how I can continue to be the best I can as an educator.
All right, thank you. So this time, Dr. Bowman Foster, you're going to go first. Okay. So the second question is, in your experience, what are the most common challenges that students face in either a face-to-face and or online courses, and how have you adjusted your teaching to address those challenges?
Imposter syndrome is a nightmare, and it is heartbreaking to watch students go through it. And every semester, I see students that are struggling with this. And, my goal is to make sure all students can reach their personal, professional goals, and imposter syndrome can really break you. Um, so I, you know, again, looking at studies, I really researched this a lot. When I first got into teaching, my first year teaching as an adjunct was 2006. When I first got into teaching, I immediately noticed that. I was like, wow, and being fresh out of college myself, I had struggled with that as well. So, I immediately started, reading things. How do I help my students overcome this? Things like that, using that evidence-based research. And one of the biggest things that all of these studies repeated was making sure students know you empathize with them. You most likely have even been through that to a point. And with both my online students and my face-to-face students, even though the imposter syndrome might be a little bit different, it's still the same, and it's still very much a threat to their success. With the face-to-face students, they tend to compare themselves a lot to their classmates. And I think that's kind of a human nature thing that we do. And I try to, I really talk a lot about SWOT analyses, and assess your own strengths and weaknesses. Find somebody else who might be strong in something you're not. That does not mean they're better than you, but that means you can help each other out. So I use that a lot. With my online students, I tend to see imposter syndrome among those who consider themselves not to be as tech savvy. And, they're like, this is really going to hold me back in this class. I'm like, well, you register for classes, so you at least know something, about the computer. And also with them, I definitely use myself as an example. I am from a very small town. I am, I'm kind of a Gen X millennial. So, unlike the current generation, I did not come out of the womb with a computer in my hand. I know when I first started my undergrad at Chapel Hill, we were the first freshman class that was given laptops. And at home, we had this huge desktop. And I remember getting in line to get my laptop, and they handed it to me. And I just stood there, and the guy was like, do you need something? And I said, where's the rest of it? Because I had never even seen a laptop. I'm thinking, where's all the other stuff? So I tell those students that I'm like, look, I was not a tech savvy person. And now here I am teaching health information management, teaching, your computer science based courses. You really can achieve anything if you set your mind to it. And so, I really just use what I've read, the examples I've read. I listen to a lot of podcasts regarding imposter syndrome in students and how to overcome that. So that's, definitely kind of my takeaway from that, something I'll continue to do, and hopefully something I can help all of my students overcome. I don't know who I'm passing it to. So
We're going to go to
you threw me
Dr.
for a
Crowe
loop there,
next.
making me go first.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dr. Crowe.
Yeah, so some challenges, I think this might be a little unique to my field, but if you throw sport in front of something, I think students think that it's the easy way out a lot of times. So the first challenge that I always face in a face-to-face or an online course is making it known that it is serious. And for those of you out there who are listening to me, sport is a serious field too. Okay, it is a serious field. But as far as that aspect goes, what I try to do is implement and talk about all the different, I don't know, just ideas that we're going to go through throughout our program together. One issue that always arises is we have a very high proportion of the athletic population that takes our program too, which is good and bad. Love having athletes in my class. I have so many examples to talk about, but also on the flip side of things, they again think that it's going to be an easy thing. They've played sports their whole life, so they already walk in knowing everything they're going to need to know for this. So that's kind of the first challenge that I have to overcome that's field specific, excuse me. But then on top of that, trying to think about it from an online course perspective, my biggest struggle that we've actually learned through our course so far this year together is how to keep people engaged in an online platform. even though I teach synchronous online classes, I believe that especially with cameras off and all the things that students like to do in online spaces, it just leads this distance that is hard to bridge and hard to connect. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more for one of the other questions I think Dr. Ship will have, but I think that's good for now.
I'll go ahead and jump in. Everything that was said in the psychology department, definitely we have a lot of students who think that all they're going to do is talk about their feelings. And then when we start throwing research methods and statistics, they're like, whoa, wait, what is that? But one thing I've noticed is students have competing priorities. And so it's not that they don't value class. It's not that they don't want to learn from you, but they have bills to pay, or they're taking care of, parents or siblings or children. And so that's something that whether they're online, they think they have more flexibility a lot of the times because it's online, because especially if it's asynchronous. But that's an easy way for them to get behind. And then, in person, they just maybe they don't come or different things like that. So one thing that I try to do, especially with online classes, and my students would say I don't do this, but those that know me know that I do this. But I tell them there's no late work in certain classes. And then I say, but things arise, come talk to me. And so in person, we can have those conversations. In my online classes, especially the ones that are synchronous, I typically have a staggered submission kind of thing. And so if you submit it by the deadline, you have the opportunity to earn full credit. But anything that's due before the midterm, you can submit it up until the midterm, and Canvas automatically adjusts it, right? It automatically takes off points for how many days it's late. And then what I do is I set Canvas to have a minimum score, right? The score can't go below this. So trying to be flexible in some ways with our students is one thing that I have tried to do, because just like they have competing priorities, we have competing priorities. With synchronous classes, I'm the 8 a.m. person, so I teach 8 a.m. a lot of times. And if I have a synchronous class at 8 a.m. the first week, I say, okay, I know you guys are probably not camera ready. And my students that know me, I make a couple of jokes about some things that, and so I'll say, I'll give you 10 minutes to get camera ready because I need to see your faces so I can kind of get to know you for the first couple classes. And they do, and they appreciate it. I get a lot of like one-on-one messages saying, thank you for the heads up. And they'll go kind of get themselves together and come back, and then they're camera ready. So just a couple of things like that, trying to account for cameras being off. And then, like I said, with students and competing priorities.
Wonderful. So what I'm hearing is the importance of transparency, but then also whether it's documented or it's kind of the unspoken that a life happens policy. We're still maintaining the rigor, the expectation of completion, but realizing that we are teaching human beings and not robots. And so life does happen. Thank you. Okay, our next question is, have you faced any resistance or challenges from students when implementing a new teaching practice? And if so, how did you overcome it? And we'll start this time with you, Dr. Crowe.
Yeah, so one thing I try to do the best of my ability is to make all modalities and teaching styles have some sort of preference in class, whether it's through different sections or different modules that I teach. For some students, this comes as an issue or they kind of resist this. Because I believe that most students, through time, they've gone through their schooling, expecting, especially in college classes, to be lectured at. And so I have faced some students who seem to appreciate when I try to have all these different modalities, or I try to spend an entire class period of us doing some sort of activity instead of me just talking about things. But there has been resistance from this as well. I've had some students tell me, "Are we actually learning anything?" Before, which I understand that to an extent, right? Like throughout their whole life, they've had this very similar way of learning. So having these completely different ways of implementing what I view as critical thinking skills or anything related to those kind of notions may be a challenge to them. And so what I try to do to make sure they know that they are learning something is we have some sort of reflection assignment, or maybe a small writing assignment, something along those lines, where they reflect back on this. They think through everything that they have learned, and then if it's applicable to something like research or an end of the semester paper or something along those lines, I try to use those ideas and say, have this be the basis for your paper, right? And so now let's take all these connections, all these things that we've learned in this completely new teaching style or learning style, and let's see what research says about it within in my case, within the sports world. So that's one that I've had, I wouldn't say persistently, but one that I've definitely had to address in the past.
Dr. Richards?
I can relate to that because I try to split my in-person classes. I try to split them up, and even online, I do what now I know it's the term micro lectures. I don't really believe in like a long lecture period. But what I try to do is either give something practical for them to apply it, or do something that is fun, that is directly related to what we were supposed to learn. And at first students gave me pushback because they were like, well, I don't understand how playing Sudoku is related, until I said, well, Sudoku is a well-defined problem. And so it has a correct answer. Like, you're not, there's not going to be all these different things. And then they're like, oh, I didn't think about it like that. And so now I try to um set the course up to where once we get to the fun assignment, they see it immediately. And so I actually did that this morning with my principles of learning class. We were talking about memory and cognitive load. And at the end of class, or right before class ended, we played Simon. And they have it online, and right, and it gives you the pattern. So it's a sound along with the light, and you have to like tap it. So I had them each, and then I can bring their phones in because they love their devices. And so I have them play on their phones, and then I have them compete in their little small groups, and then they have to kind of talk about how it applied to the course. And I kind of walk around and listen, and then they have something they upload to Canvas to let me know they participated. So just making sure they really see how something practical or something fun is directly related to the lesson. That I had some pushback, but I worked through that now.
I will kind of piggyback on what both of my colleagues here said. I'm actually going to use an example to kind of a specific policy that I implemented last academic year. So when it comes to group projects, I do not necessarily give everybody in the group the same grade. It depends on if they all worked equally, then yes, they will. But if not, then I don't. I teach the undergraduate capstone course where they have a service learning project. It's huge, big thing, big deal. And this is not something you can wait to the end of the semester to do. They actually have to form an organization. They have to come up with a service to offer the community. They actually have to do the event, and then they have to create a paper and a presentation based off that. So it definitely takes the whole semester. And at the very beginning, I tell them all, any written communication between group members must be via your school email. No GroupMe, no text messaging, no Facebook chat, nothing like that. It must be through school email. And if it's not, I will take points off. I'm like, well, why? We love GroupMe, all this. And I'm like, because it is too easy for somebody to say, oh, I didn't get the GroupMe message, or you put my phone number in wrong, or you did this, you do that. And then they're arguing when you guys are claiming they didn't do something. But if you include them in that email chain and then you forward that to me, I have that documentation that, yes, they were part of the communication at the beginning. They knew what was going on. They just didn't respond. And, they'll push back, and then I'll say, what is one of the most common causes of issues in the workplace? Communication or lack of. And I don't teach communication, but I kind of do because I'm teaching leadership in healthcare. And communication is horrible. We're all awful at it. Let's just be honest. We're all horrible at it. And so this is my way of, kind of enforcing the importance of communication, doing it the right way, and documentation. Because we have a saying in healthcare, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. If you didn't write down that you gave them the insulin, then you didn't give them the insulin. Even if you remember giving it to them, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So, I'm using that new policy for the group projects to teach them communication, to teach them documentation and things like that. And, students talk, word gets around. And I know last year, oh, the pushback, the groaning. They did it, but it was a groaning. This year, my fall students came and they already knew. They already knew what to expect because the previous students had already told them. And before I even said it, I had already received emails chains where I had been CC between group members. So, again, they get the pushback, but as my colleagues were saying, when you explain to them why you're doing it, they're like, oh, it's like the little light bulbs go off, like, okay, it's kind of tough love, but we'll do it. So
So what each of you have just expressed, even though there are challenges that occur, the importance of, again, that word transparency. There's something called a tilt model, which is transparency in teaching and learning. And so when we are able to articulate for students the why behind the ask, it helps to bring some of that clarity and reduce some of that tension that occurs in the academic environment of why are we doing this? I want to do it a different way. Okay. Our next question is, and you've already touched on this a little bit, we've heard about micro lectures, diversification in terms of grading practices. What specific evidence-based teaching practices have you implemented that you have found particularly effective in promoting student success? We'll start with you, Dr. Richardson.
So I did mention the micro lectures, just trying to think outside of, I have a hour and 15-minute class. I don't have to stand up there and talk to them for an hour of that hour and 15 minutes, right? But the one, I like anything that has them working together, any type of group work, a think, pair, share, anything that really just has them working together and communicating together, because sometimes there's a concept I can think I've explained it at the most simplest level, but one of their peers will say something and they're like, oh, that's what she's talking about. And so if they start communicating in class on projects, assignments, different things like that, it helps to build those relationships and build that community. And so that's what I really like to try to do. I think anything with community, group work, pairing, those are the things I'm doing.
I think it's me this time, right? Okay. One thing that I've used is the corrective feedback, or I've heard it called many things, just feedback in general, corrective feedback, constructive feedback. What our master's program is CBE, competency-based education. And so just to quickly summarize that, our students get all their assignments at the beginning of the semester and they can work at their own pace. So if they have, we'll just say 10 assignments, they have the grading rubric, all the resources they need to complete that assignment, everything is there. And these grading rubrics are on point. Like, when I am grading these assignments they turn in, they know exactly what I'm checking and what it's pertaining to. And also with assignments, if I have seen, common issues, common mistakes, errors, I tend to make an example so I can be like, okay, this is what you did, and here's an example of how it should be done. So after I fill out the grading rubrics for them that, clearly state where they might not have mastered that assignment, I will provide them with those examples, just saying, you can do this. Here's where you went wrong. I see why you did it this way, but this is what this actually means. So, a lot of our students are visual learners. A lot of them are, really need those examples. You could explain it, like Dr. Richardson said, you could explain it all day long and you said it clearly and you said it correctly. But sometimes, and I'm a visual learner, so I get it. Sometimes I just need to see it. So I think feedback is super important. I know I have heard students, and I've had experiences as a student where you turn an assignment in, you wait 3-4 weeks, you get no feedback, and then you get it and you bombed it and you have no idea why. And now you don't have time because you've already been applying what you did to other assignments. And you're like, well, I probably bombed those too, because I didn't have the feedback. So again, just providing that corrective or constructive feedback, also providing it in a timely manner, and then having examples for things that you see tend to be common errors, common misconceptions, or, concepts that are hard to grasp for students.
I'd like to actually elaborate deeper on 2 points that Dr. Bowman Foster said, because I think 2 of them are ones that I've been working on and continue to work on the most throughout my time as an instructor here. The first is providing clear instructions. So that, I think, is just the easiest thing that we can do as instructors to make sure they actually understand what the purpose is having really easy to follow rubrics, having some sort of model that builds up to hopefully reach our learning outcomes that the course is set out to achieve as well, I think is the best. But then the part I really wanted to elaborate on is this visual learner capacity. So I teach communications, kind of like my secondary area, I guess you could say. We have something in humans called the picture superiority effect, which research ranges, but it's somewhere in the range that people remember words with images 65% better than they remember just words or just someone saying those words. So always having some video, some sort of visual aid that complements the information that you're saying or you're instructing is always going to be best practice to making sure students actually retain the information and then use that information not just to retain and to, regurgitate on an exam is the expression that I like to hear, but to have those skills to be a critical thinker later on in the program or within the course itself.
A lot of feedback. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
We heard a lot of great teaching strategies, the use of visual aids, corrective feedback, think, pair, share, micro lectures. And so we have a lot of options to pull from to ensure that we are giving our students voice and choice in the learning environment. Okay, our next to almost last question is, can you share, and anyone can jump in first, can you share a moment in one or more of your classes or a student success story where you saw a significant breakthrough in learning as a direct result of one or more of the practices that you just shared?
I'd love to start us off on this one. I got one and that immediately comes to mind. As mentioned before, I tried to do all sorts of different teaching styles and course or assignment creations, I should say. One thing that I do in probably two or three of my courses at this point, because it's been so successful, is I have students do some sort of graphic design project. So I teach like a small marketing section in a lot of my classes or social media. Of course, we got to talk about social media and I think all of our classes at this point. But for those students who aren't very good writers, who learn through a visual way, they can actually apply some of the skills that they learn, especially since we're in Adobe campus. We have access to these great Adobe features that are just amazing. Businesses pay thousands of dollars to have access to these features. So I do a small kind of like workshop to show them just the basics and give them ideas for what they can do potentially with this graphic design project. And I've had a lot of students who, again, they've struggled writing previously. They might not be the best test takers, and then they completely shine when they have to tell a story through a visualization, a graphic design component. And learning how to use that software is what a lot of them in at least my field, sport management, they want to do in the future too. So by incorporating this completely different assignment that, 3 years ago I didn't do, never even thought of, someone mentioned this to me, and then I saw students just like be so excited and thank me for actually having an assignment like this. I think it's just been multiple success stories for me.
I can jump in there. I'm actually kind of going to piggyback and speak on something similar. For one of my courses, I actually have my students make a video, an animation, kind of like a cartoon animation video. We had a student, this was in our master's program. He was even older than I am, so he also was not born tech savvy, as we put it. And he was already a CEO. I believe at the time he had two medical practices under him. He's got like 8 or 9 now. He's an amazing student, but he hated computers, was terrified of them. He said, I have people that do all that for me. And so when he got to this, and, I'm talking about, using these different programs to create an animation that would actually, they were presenting a new electronic health record option to their C-suite. And I said, I don't want you to do a PowerPoint because that's what everybody does. You need to learn to present things in different ways because you're going to go to conferences and stuff where you need to stand out. And, not putting PowerPoint down. I love PowerPoint, but sometimes you need the edge. And this, knowing this technology can give you the edge. He was so nervous. I just remember him thinking, I'm not going to do this. I said, you're going to be fine. I helped him pick out one of the software programs to use. And he, aced that assignment. His presentation was great. I loved seeing him interact with some of his younger fellow students because they were a little more familiar with stuff like that already. So he was kind of helping them out with some of the stuff he knew. They were helping him out with the technology. And this was about, what year did he graduate? This was in right before COVID, so 2019. He now, every time he's an adjunct for us, when I talk to him, he's like, yeah, I'm still doing my cartoon presentations. He still uses that today when he goes to conferences, when he's presenting places. And he says he always, people always comment on how different it is and it makes it memorable and things like that. So I was just glad that he had his whole life just been very anti-technology, anti-computers, and me basically making him embrace this assignment, really showed him, I don't need to be scared. I can do this. I can learn new things. And he probably knows more stuff than I do now about, presentation software and things like that. So it was really heartwarming. And it's just good to see that, because you get nervous when you push somebody, but, obviously pushing him was the right thing to do. And now he's like a tech nerd like me now. So
I'll go a little bit different direction with I'm thinking about one that I implemented last semester as a result of my participation in ACUE. And I always use the feature in Canvas, like if a student, like, to let them know, like, hey, this assignment is due like by 11:59 p.m., just like a quick reminder. And, reach out to students and say, hey, you missed this assignment, things like that. But I actually used the feature this time in a more positive direction to acknowledge that students who had improved. And so that was something that was in our ACUE. And I'm like, well, I do this in my in-person classes. I'm like, why don't I do it in my online classes? And this class was online asynchronous, and it was a large class. I had, I think, about 70 students in that class. And just kind of going through and just saying, hey, I noticed your improvement. You've really come a long way. Great job. And immediately the feedback I got, thanks, Dr. Richardson. I appreciate it. And they just kept increasing and increasing and increasing. So just really trying to acknowledge when they do make that change, if they're not going in the best direction. Like I said, we do it, I think, in our in-person class, it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier for us, but doing it online, especially in an asynchronous course, is something that now I definitely implement. So that would be mine.
So is there a closing thought that you would share with the group related to student success teaching that you haven't shared yet, to encourage our colleagues? For those who have completed ACUE, those who have not, will be your closing message to everyone? And whoever would like to jump in first.
I can go. I didn't know. I thought I saw some people get ready to unmute. I think my closing message, especially if you're doing an online course, a lot of the things that we do in our in-person courses, they translate and can translate very well. They just look a little bit different. So that would be one. And then one that we haven't really mentioned, that really focuses on student success is just, really, actually, we have mentioned it, but the communication piece. I think communicating with our students and letting them know that we're human. Dr. Foster, you said you talked about your grandmother. My grandmother is 92 and is a former school teacher. So just kind of the communication, she said, was always a big thing, to let students know that they can do this. Sometimes they really don't think they can. And so those things, just make a big difference, whether we're in person, online synchronous, or asynchronous. So just a couple, really that communication goes a long way.
I can piggyback on that again. Yes, again, communication is huge. Teaching is hard. I tell everyone all the time, I could work at the hospital. It'd be easier hours. I'm literally done when I clock out, make more. You don't clock out from this job. There is no clocking out. Emails are always coming through. There's always, students need something, and that is fine. You really have to love teaching to do this. With that being said, we also owe it to our students to, continuously strive to improve our teaching methods. And, again, as long as I've been in teaching, and even healthcare, any industry I've worked in, it is definitely the communication. I definitely agree with Dr. Richardson. Even though it might look different, what you do online, you can still deliver the same quality, the same instruction. It can still be just as good. You just have to, tweak it here and there. One thing that I really get a lot of positive feedback from my students, I do weekly check-ins. I send an email, hey, just a heads up, this is what's going on this week. I send it via email and I post it in Canvas or Brightspace. We use Brightspace for the master's program. I put, I try to remind them what's due. I always include some silly little meme at the end. And every semester, I have students tell me, I can't wait to see what memes you send this semester. And it's just a way. You don't know what kind of day they've had. You don't know if it's Monday, you don't know how stressful their weekend is. You don't know what kind of anxiety they have about stuff they know that's coming that week. And it's just kind of a, reminder, hey, this is what's going on. Here's a little lighthearted note. And I always end it with, and as always, I am here if you need anything. And I have also had students reach out to me and say, I really appreciate that reminder. I really feel that, I can come to you if I have a question about something, if I'm concerned about assignment, and again, it's just, we think, oh, students know they can just ask me that, but do they? It's okay just to give them that little reminder and be like, hey, I'm here. Just because you don't see me every day, I'm right here at my email. Call me, email me, whatever. I'm still your instructor. I'm here if you need anything. So.
Yeah, and I'll echo some words. I think they both summed it up pretty well. But as the new guy here, I guess to say, the world is continuously changing. We need to stick with the changes, right? We can't fight the changes as far as things transitioning more to being online, as far as the new student and all their preferences and how they want to be taught. So by us doing things like using ACUE as a resource so that we can learn the best practices for these new students for online spaces, I think by doing those, we're doing the best we can to continue being good instructors. So my suggestion to you all, I mean, everyone who's here at 2:45 on a Tuesday, I think y'all are doing a great thing just by attending something like this and hearing from your colleagues about this. So yeah, definitely I applaud you all for being here because you all are already taking necessary steps to continue learning and to continue being better in this space. So yeah, that's my 2 cents to kind of put a dot my I and cross my T here.
Thank you. So I do want to give our attendees an opportunity to pose any questions that they may have for our panelists on today. So you can unmute or you can put your question in the chat. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Nice reflections, man. As one who isn't AQE certified, but I'm certified everywhere else. So that's like the one thing I haven't done. Nonetheless, I do have a more technical question. Have any of you been able to assess success? And I might have missed this on the front end. I kind of came in. Have any of you been able to evaluate the successes of your courses, like, for like DFW rates, things like that? Have you had good comparative data, like AQE, post AQE, and how the students have been successful since you guys have gone through the program? Thank you.
I can speak to that just a little bit because when I took over the MHA program, we were still hybrid and we were taking that data to see how, making sure there weren't any negative effects when we transitioned to online. So we always collect the data, but we were really assessing it at that time just to watch it closely. The instructors that I'm trying to think how to say this nicely. If you were organized before the semester started, your students tended to do better. The ones that were adding stuff in, halfway through the semester, right before midterm, things like that, you could tell that students struggled more in those classes. It gave them anxiety. I think it's fine if, we have a current event that happens and it really pertains to your class, by all means add that in. But I'm talking more about like the core stuff that really should be there, And so again, I think with us, anytime you're, adding a new teaching strategy, changing a teaching method, any type of big change or whatever to a class, curriculum, program, whatever, it is imperative that we are prepared because it's never going to go as planned. But as long as you are prepared, you've got the base there, it is easier to deal with those unplanned changes that you're going to have to make. So that was kind of the key takeaway we took. Definitely the students, the classes where we saw the highest rates of struggle, for lack of a better term, were the classes where the instructors did not come to the preparation meetings. They did not turn in things by the deadline like they were supposed to, things like that. Again, it's not, my first time teaching completely online for our MHA program. I'm not going to say there weren't any hiccups, but I was able to resolve them a lot quicker because I already had my calendar and my syllabus and, everything into the shell like I was supposed to. And it was just easier to change that. So I don't know if that kind of completely answers your question, but just from the data we were collecting when switching from hybrid to online, that was what we were able to get out of the analyses.
No, I help. It helps. Thank you, Dr. Foster. Just more of an inquiry than anything, because um, just gauging like efficiency and equity in how we as facilitators of information, because that's what we are. We're facilitators of information. And I've heard overwhelming um overwhelming sentiments from the program. So I know for me, we're always like, I don't know who said it specifically, maybe Dr. Crowe, I don't know, but we should always be seeking to strive to do better, right? To evolve, to grow, no matter how well you think you may kind of present in the classroom, albeit face to face or online. So for me, it's just important. I still I struggle with faculty who can't even respond to an email sometimes. So, that's many of our challenges in any given institution, not just at ours. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Are there any other questions for our panelists? You can put your question in the chat or you can unmute yourself. So Dr. Atati says, thank you for the session. Is AI ChatGPT impacting your teaching practice in your respective fields? And if so, what student success strategies have been beneficial in enhancing learning outcomes?
I can jump in on this one because I teach the advanced research methods and stats course in psychology. And so that one comes with a research project and paper that they have to write in the end. And I'm actually, because they're the advanced students, I actually embrace it and I try to get them to use Scholar AI as a way to find new information they can add to their papers, because this is a topic they've developed over 2 previous courses. So by the time they get to me, I'm like, hey, it's time to find some new literature. It's time to look at this from a different perspective. And so I challenge them with using that. This is something I've just started recently. And what's great about it is that it will say, oh, you can say, hey, well, what are the sources? And it will link the sources. And then I have them go in and look at those sources and say, okay, are they reliable, right? Are they peer reviewed? Are they all these things that we want them to be? Do they meet this criteria? So that's one way I try to have them use it. Another thing that I do is, and I actually picked this up at a conference I went to, the Southeastern Teaching of Psychology conference last spring. And the keynote speaker talked about having the students create an argument, then having them take the prompt and put it in ChatGPT to have ChatGPT create the argument. And then they have to submit both. And at the end, they have to decide which one they want to go with. And they have to talk about why they chose that particular one. So even things like that, instead of just trying to ignore it, they're using it. And they're not just using GPT, right? They're using all types of, AI software, right? So we have to figure out how to teach them to use it responsibly. And so those are just a couple of things.
Yeah, and so I actually use something like that, Dr. Richardson, that assignment that you said in one of my courses for a paper that I write. I have them use the prompt in Chat GPT or whatever AI software they want to use, and then I have them critique the paper of what could be better. What did the AI system not do that I expect you to do in this? So I think it does help them with their skills, and I think we need to embrace AI, honestly, more than anything else. But we need also, as Dr. Richardson said, excuse me, Dr. Richardson said, use it as a tool. Think of it for an outlining purposes. Edit it so your voice is still incorporated within the material that you get, right, from the AI system. And there are a lot of strategies out there that I'd be glad to talk with anyone afterward because I'm still learning it too.
Hey, Dr. Crowe, I think it's mission critical. It's like some of us who remember teaching before cell phones. So, we fought against it initially. That was the initial approach, right? I'm a criminologist by training. So everything, the criminal justice, punitive, punitive, punitive. So we did everything in our power to punish these students and make rules and regulations to try to kind of persuade and motivate them not to use the phones. And at the end of the day, we realized, we can't really beat them. We had to kind of join them. So how do you incorporate the phones in the classroom? And how do you say, okay, everybody, all right, you're already on your phone, look up this real quick. Because, and it alleviated a lot of their anxiety. And jokes aside, I actually got that from a psychologist, Dr. Richardson, who said, y'all can fight it all y'all want, but you're not going to win, not with it, because their very fabric is a part of this digital space, right? So your point is very well noted. And I think it was here. I mean, maybe 6 years ago, it was one of the computer science professors was like, well, yeah, he's like, I use Chat GPT to write recommendations. And I was like, well, dag, you know how much free time I would create if I did that? All I got to do is put my information in there and I craft a nice letter and I clean it up a little bit. Why not? So, I think, some of, I guess, our more seasoned colleagues maybe don't feel like it's, they're still at that space where they don't want to embrace this whole new digital era we're in. But the reality of it is we all have to jump on board or, fade to black, as they often say. So, all right, I'm done talking, y'all.
Now, Dr. Monell, you make a great point. I definitely you know how many requests for recommendation letters we get in a semester. And for students you know well, those letters are a little bit easier to write. For the ones you don't know as well, but you still want to support them, you think they will be great to go to grad school, and take that resume, link it to GPT, add in what you know about the student, and boom. And then you can just download it and edit it as needed. It saves a lot of time.
And on top of that, I've actually used it to help sculpt out assignments I've created for class too. It is so helpful. I give some ideas of topics I want to cover, then it'll give me some sort of format where I can adjust it a little bit to fit my class better. So it's been very useful for that. Not as useful as ACUE, of course, but very useful for helping think through the assignments.
I also wanted to mention, I think Dr. Sim brought this up at last month's general faculty meeting, but they're doing that new AI committee. I talked with her afterwards about using it for mentoring purposes as well. So that's something I'm supposed to be getting together with her at some point. But I've actually had students who have told me they just needed advice on something, like professional advice. They go type it in and it gives them pretty decent feedback about it. So, and Dr. Ship, I wanted to let you know, I know ACUE has that AI training. So I'm extremely interested in that. So you will be receiving an email from me.
We do have a few colleagues on who've completed the quick study series, the Teaching with AI, where you'll get more information about what that'll look like for the next academic year. He said, if you need additional test questions, upload your PowerPoint and ask AI to create additional test questions, then ask it to provide the answers. And so AI is a great resource and not a replacement for your expertise, a great resource. All right, we're coming to the end of our time. So if you all can, please give our panelists a virtual round of applause for sharing their expertise with us, their experience with us, their time. I don't see nobody hand clapping. There we go. Okay, there we go. Yay. So we started out again today with the statement that Chancellor Brown made at the beginning of our State of the Campus address, that student success is an institutional way of life. And so again, there are many variables and factors that contribute to student success, but we wanted to focus our attention today on the role of teaching and learning on student success. This will conclude our first part of From ACUE to Breakthrough, student success stories, and we will have a part 2 next month on March the 18th, where we will hear from 3 different faculty members who will be sharing their experience and some teaching practices as well. So thank you all for taking the time to join us on today. Thank you to our panelists. And on behalf of ACUE, you will receive a gift, and I will get in contact with you shortly about how you can receive your gift. So thank you all again, and please join us for our next city session, which has already been sent to your Outlook inbox. All right, have a good day.
Take
Thank
care,
you, Dr.
everyone.
Ship. This
Thank
was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.